every single thing that's been done in every single country was illegal. There were laws everywhere to prevent this from happening. The whole point was this stuff was meant to be impossible in our societies, and none of them care. Going from there to ending up where I am now, which is where I essentially would almost say that mainstream political satire is a total fraud. It's not real. And the only way to do effective satire when it matters is to be on the outside. I think forgiveness is really important for yourself as well as whoever you're forgiving. Right? Forgiveness is part of forgiveness is you letting go.
Is it strange being stared at?
It is strange.
I sort of quite like it. It's sort of quite intimate, isn't it?
I'm conscious though that, and other people are conscious, when I meet someone, if I'm looking at someone, I can't really avoid it. I'm analysing their face and I'm thinking, how would I draw that? What would I pick out? What features would I exaggerate?
Yeah.
And like my family have this joke of that they'll say, oh, don't stand still for too long or he'll draw you.
Right.
And it's weird to be on the receiving end.
Yeah.
But some people, or some characters I really like drawing and I find it really easy to capture them.
Yeah.
And then other people are really, really difficult. Some faces are just much, much harder, especially when you're trying to do it in a particular style. So it needs to look like a cartoon. But there are some faces you can't play around with too much or you just lose the likeness.
Right.
Like Joe Biden is really difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, partly because he's changed his face so much, hasn't he?
Yeah, obviously there is this idea with Joe Biden that he no longer looks like what he did 20 years ago at all, which I totally can see, because obviously I'm looking at pictures of these people all the time and I'm thinking that's not the same person. Yeah. Even if he's had surgery or whatever, it's just not the same face. But then B, even in the current time, he will look different from one week to the next. His face won't be quite the same.
Right.
So that's difficult. It's the same thing with Justin Trudeau, actually. You can look at photos of him and it almost looks like a different person.
Yeah. At
different times or in different places. Obviously, I solved the problem with him because I just created this that's sort of deliberately funny in the sense that it's very lazy. Yeah. It's a very lazy way of drawing somebody that makes it funny. Donald Trump has also got a very difficult face to get right. Even though there's so much to work with because of his hair and he's quite sort of jowly and he has this sort of pouting mouth. It's the way his features are arranged is quite unusual. He's a really unusual looking person.
He is quite strange, isn't he?
Yeah. He's got very odd body shape, and then on top of that he wears strangely fitting suits, these sort of big shoulders, and baggy trousers and things, and he does have quite small feet. But then it's sort of more satisfying when you manage to get it.
Yeah.
And again, working for the paper, when you're on a tight deadline, sometimes you haven't quite got it, but you don't have time to start again or really work on it. Whereas now I can. Sometimes I get stuck now on someone and I might spend a whole morning on the face and then start it again.
Yeah.
And then you get it, and it's really frustrating because so much of the time when you sketch it out, you've caught it exactly how you want because you weren't really thinking about it. And then when you try and do it for the final thing, you can't make it work.
Yeah. So one thing that I thought about asking you, not from a philosophical point of view, although it sounds like a philosophical question, but more from a sort of practical point of view of where we're at, is what is evil?
That's a big one, isn't it?
Well, it is a big one, so it can lead all over the place, and it has implications for what...
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting because quite early on I started using the word evil to describe what was happening and upset a lot of people. So don't be ridiculous, you sound mad calling it. Of course it's not evil. There are certain, again, this comes back to those, what are supposed to be moral foundations that can't be shaken, that any society that claims to be civilized or good should all share, whatever else you argue about. When those things begin to be abandoned or inverted, that is evil, in my view. And evil is, I suppose, causing suffering and harm deliberately, with intent, because that's what you're trying to do. And it became really clear to me during the first few months that they are trying to cause this harm, because they are telling us that they're aware that all these deaths are going to occur from lockdowns. They know what they're doing. Yeah. They know how much people are suffering. And it's, people are saying, well, we just have to do it. If everyone complies, there won't be any more lockdowns, or once you take the jabs, they won't need to lock us down anymore. And you're thinking, no, the way to stop doing something that's wrong is just to stop doing it. There shouldn't be any demands on us, the victims, to do this or that in order to get our oppressors to stop oppressing us. That's not how it should work. But I suppose I was so shocked at the speed at which so many people accepted these ideas and began to do things that I just didn't think they would have thought were acceptable a few years previously. People well, friends, people you've known all your life. Yeah. You think, you don't agree with this. This is not the kind of person you are. Within the space of a few weeks, they had people behaving in the most bizarre ways, performing these strange rituals, spouting these ideas that were just morally disgusting. And I know how powerful propaganda is, and I know what happened with the media and all of that. But I did begin to get this sense, more like an instinct, I suppose, that there might be some other force at work here, helping it along. Something, unseen or not of the physical world, maybe. Mm-hmm. Like there is a force of evil acting in the world. And I suppose that as a result, I came back to a point of thinking, well, there must be an opposite force then. There has to be a force for good. I was quite religious growing up, and then I sort of went to university and I completely lost it. Yeah. Became quite a militant atheist for a point. And then over the last few years, I've really come back to believing that there must be an opposite force. There has to be a force for good, and it probably makes sense to call that God. I'm still slightly reluctant to call myself a Christian, because I'm not sure whether I fit the definition.
I don't know what that. I don't know what that word means, to be honest. It kind of seems, it sort of bamboozles me a little bit that it's still applicable, because you can follow the teachings of Christ, or you can follow, but Christ himself wouldn't have said, now go out and be Christians, so it's a kind of man-made term which seems slightly redundant to me.
And then obviously you have this has happened to a lot of people have had a kind of spiritual awakening or a returning to a vaguely religious worldview. And I remember thinking this in 2020, what a tremendous opportunity this is for the church, say the Church of England, whose churches have been empty, to suddenly get all these people in. And first of all, they all agreed to close down because the government told them to. Mm-hmm. But also when you could go back into churches, all you got was propaganda about the pandemic or Ukraine or whatever it was, and people wearing masks and saying, don't come up for communion unless you feel safe and this stuff. And you think, this is the last place I want to be. And you're just alienating all these people who are suddenly searching for spiritual answers or comfort. It was really, obviously, again, that was part of the whole point of what was going on. There is, I think, whether you yourself are religious or not, or spiritual or not, I do think people ought to be able to see that whoever is driving us in this direction, whoever wants to take us to where we're unfortunately all headed, that is probably, I think, driven by a spiritual belief in the worst possible sense. Because it doesn't satisfy me to just see it as a practical thing of, some people have decided they have to reduce the population because otherwise it'll be a disaster, and they believe in climate change, and it's a mechanical, practical process of how do we get rid of a load of people. Yeah. Because there are other ways of doing that are not steeped in so much weird ritual and symbolism. Yeah. And again, the total inversion of good moral values that has occurred. And again, this weird stuff about constantly, which is absolutely true, it's what's happened, constantly having to tell people what it is you're doing. People say, we were lied to. And I always say, but you weren't really. You were only partly lied to. The way they did everything was to make sure that at any point, anybody who was prepared to think for themselves could see that it was bad, that they shouldn't go along with it, that it was going to end in disaster. Yeah. They obviously made sure about that. There are all sorts of ways in which there were things they could have hidden and they didn't. They made sure everyone was aware. So that only really makes sense when you look at this weird belief that wicked kind of satanic people have, where you always have to tell your victims what they're doing. And if you look at the jabs, let's say the point of the jabs was to massively reduce the population, and they were designed to kill and injure billions of people. I think there's probably more to it than that even. It was certainly part of it. Anyway, if that's your goal, why do it in this way of essentially staging a pandemic, having all this propaganda, lockdowns, manipulating people's minds, and making sure that those people essentially agree to go and have the stuff injected into them while knowing, because you've pretty much told them that this stuff's going to harm you. There would be other ways of getting rid of people. Yeah. And it's that thing of, they had to get people to agree to it, basically.
So if I was to offer another possibility why it appears like that, why it appears to be the case that this, could it be, and this is perhaps more maybe how I have tended to, the sort of conclusion that I've tended to come to is it is to do with, which is why I asked the question about evil, that it's not necessarily something separate, that it's not necessarily a force out there doing something to us, that somehow, and this would tie in with why they have to tell us, or we have to be told, we have to be made aware, is that somehow on a kind of big picture level, that we are somehow playing a game in relation to this force, which is actually a sort of a reflection of our own shit, our own stuff that we're...
Well, yes, well, yeah. Then you get into quite deep theological stuff that I know what you mean, and you're sort of if you're talking about the fall, the concept of the fall, like say the idea that we were created one way, then corrupted ourselves basically by giving into temptation or whatever you want to call it, or reaching beyond our means.
Well, that's not quite how I mean, that is another way of looking at things. Not necessarily that. It's more that for whatever reason we're in this drama. There's this battle. No, for me, in a way, I get to the point. The intellect, I sort of give up with the intellect because I just know it takes me so far, and then it's never going to provide the answers. So I kind of surrender to what I can experience.
Yeah.
Here now, which is that there is this battle. So I don't know. Yeah. There's a conflict. Yeah. There's some conflict. So I have to assume that being as I'm here, part within this drama, that it is somehow connected to me, and that I'm part of that drama.
Yes.
So that's the only difference, really, is this sense of, and it's the same with David Icke when he's talking about his sort of concept of good and evil. It seems to imply kind of dualism, that somehow they're separate, and I know that's quite a common understanding of that we are fighting them, that it's us versus them, and my only sort of kind of makes me twitch a little bit from that point of view is that it's quite sort of disempowering. But it's not. If it was true, then that wouldn't be a problem. It's disempowering, whatever. But it doesn't quite ring true to me, and I just feel that maybe seeing our own, taking more responsibility slightly. It might be the whole point of this thing. So they tell us so that, a bit like a video game, you have to have the baddie to play the game. You have to get to the next.
Yes.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, we have to have, this is the conundrum, I suppose.
It is a paradox.
Because we have to have evil, we have to have darkness to understand what goodness is and to value it. And in the same way, you have to have free will for good deeds to have any meaning, or evil deeds to have any significance. You have to be choosing what to do. And I think, you're right. We are all in some way engaged in, call it a game, or this kind of. I think, from my point of view, a very significant confrontation between these two forces, these two ideas, whether they're external or internal. Seems to be the whole point of everything is, and I do think, though, that we are, for whatever reason, we're born into this world that is largely governed by deceit and illusion and lies, that sets out to corrupt us from birth almost and deceive us. But that's almost the whole point is, can you overcome that? And it feels like at the moment it's all been turned up to 11, and maybe this is a kind of there's a concerted effort to try and drag as many people down as far as possible in the hope that maybe they can't possibly ever get up again. And as it goes on, I'm more of the view, I'm not thinking so much, this is going to sound weird, because obviously I'm opposing it and I'm trying to do everything I can to fight it.
I agree with go on.
But really, it's more about endurance for me at this point. It's how much can we take as this unfolds and gets worse, which I think it will. How much are we able to resist it? That is more the key for me than sort of, I guess, fantasizing about overthrowing everybody or Nuremberg 2 or whatever other ideas people want to have. I think at the end of the day, what's going to matter is, can you endure this while believing that it will, essentially this thing will eat itself in the end, because it's made of hate and evil.
I really resonated when I heard you say that on I think it was on the UK column interview, was it? And that made a lot of sense to me, because then you're not playing into the hands of I'm fighting now. I'm just going to fight. I'm in fight mode.
No.
That's not to say we're not fighting, but you're not in fight mode. So a natural consequence of that. Well, you said it specifically in terms of beauty, truth, and other aspects of our existence, and that. So it's not a question of giving in; it's a question of finding what is of true value,
and holding on to it,
and holding on to it
as it's sort of dragged away from you. You know, it's like swimming against a current, basically. You know, how long can you keep going for before it drags you under?
Yeah.
And it's going to get stronger.
Yeah.
And you have part of you has to trust that eventually. How do I extend this metaphor? You'll reach land, or the current will change, or whatever. But it's about how much you can take, I think. I mean, I remember early on having these thoughts about, as it dawned on me, how bad all of this was, and how it obviously wasn't going to be stopped by the legal system, the judiciary, the police, the army, governments. The media wasn't going to do anything.
Yeah.
What do we do? Are we going to have to properly fight? Is there going to be a civil war? Do we need to assassinate people? All this kind of stuff. And you come to the realization that because of the nature of what they're trying to do and where they're trying to move people, as soon as we give in to that idea of violence and killing, that's their domain. That's the stuff they're doing. And we won't get through this if we do that. We've already lost as soon as we give into that, however angry we may be. And don't get me wrong, people need to be angry. It's not that you shouldn't feel cross and upset. Yeah. And it's not that you shouldn't do things to oppose what they're doing and expose what they're doing. But I think the big test is, can you stay in that place of essentially peace and light and beauty and truth and faith, even if it's not faith in God, faith that that will be enough to win, you know?
And does forgiveness come into that as well?
Yeah, forgiveness.
It does, but you know.
Forgiveness is hard, isn't it? Yes, I think forgiveness is really important for yourself as well as whoever you're forgiving. Right? Forgiveness is part of forgiveness is you letting go of resentment and anger, bitterness. I think it's hard to forgive when there's no acknowledgement, no apology, no desire for atonement. That's hard, and it doesn't always make sense, especially if whoever you're supposed to forgive is still doing the thing that you're meant to forgive them for. My big thing with the forgiveness stuff, because I get this a lot, as people probably know, if I'm calling someone out, you know, pointing out, well, this person was promoting the jabs, or Trump, for example. You know, Trump was instrumental in selling these to people, and he still hasn't acknowledged it, and he still calls himself the father of the vaccine. Or these different characters like Seymour Hotra or John Campbell or whoever who promoted them, said they were safe, and didn't oppose lockdowns, didn't point out that it was given out under duress and violated medical ethics. None of that, and then all of a sudden they turn around and say, actually, there's a problem. We've discovered it. Hooray for us. Yeah. And I'll say, well, why are we listening to these people? They obviously aren't any good. And then you get, well, yeah, but we have to forgive people. And I'm not suggesting that you can't forgive people, but there is a massive difference between forgiving someone once they apologise and saying, not only do I forgive you, but I'm going to put you up on this pedestal and ask you to tell me, lead me now and see you as a hero. That's not how it works at all. And I don't understand the lack of humility and contrition from those figures.
I think that's the key
who
point.
ought to be
Yeah.
saying, hang on a minute, I've just massively up here.
Yeah, that's the key.
And actually, I know you've all been listening to me for all this time. I made a huge mistake. I can barely live with myself knowing the mistake I've made. And what I'm going to do now is not ask you to keep listening to me and subscribing to my channel. I've now realised there are all these other people who got it right from the beginning, who actually have been hidden. They haven't had the promotion I've had. They haven't had all the money I've had. In fact, they've all lost money. They got it right from the start. Unsubscribe from my channel. I'm shutting it down. Go and listen to them. Go and listen to Professor Bhakti, Mike Yeadon, Claire Craig, whoever it might be. Don't keep listening to me because, to be honest, I can't even trust myself anymore. If I got this wrong, I'm probably going to get the next thing wrong. And there's none of that at all.
Yeah, no, that's well said. Yeah, I agree with that. Because if they did, you'd be the first to go, yeah.
And it's not that I don't want them. Anybody who understands, it may have, maybe it did take them a long time to realise this stuff, and they acknowledge that they were wrong, and they want to help. Of course, that's great. You know, come and help.
Yeah.
But maybe just, take a seat at the back and listen to. That's the other thing. There seems to be no desire in these people to even look at what was going on while they were on TV telling everyone to get jabbed. They're not even interested in finding out about who saw this from the start and who got it right. And the cynical view is that's because there's a deliberate attempt to kind of deceive people and to thinking that this idea that nobody in the world knew until sort of late 2022 that there was any problem at all. Which is incredibly dangerous. Yeah, but forgiveness is tough, and it's meant to be tough. I mean, I certainly don't. This whole Nuremberg 2 thing really confuses me. It still comes up a lot. Nuremberg 2. Some people have asked me to write it in the books that I've signed for them, which I sort of have, but I always think, I don't know what you mean by this, really. I mean, for one thing, who's going to do it? Who do you think is going to set this up? All the people capable of setting up and running something like that have just done the crimes you want them to be on trial for. Yeah. I don't know what people imagine is going to happen.
Yeah, I think it's sort of fantasy, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Because even the sort of common law advocates who, say we're going to do it ourselves and all this, it's for show, really, more than anything. No one's actually going to be arrested. And
there's a lot of things like that where, people are still kind of trying to say this or that is actually illegal, so we can get them for it, or we don't have to do this because they've got no legal right. And I always come back to this thing of every single thing that's been done in every single country was illegal. There were laws everywhere to prevent this from happening. The whole point was this stuff was meant to be impossible in our societies, and none of them care. They don't care. They almost, again, explicitly told us, the law, we don't care about that anymore. We're all going to break it for at least 3 years, and then there's going to be no consequences. In fact, all these people who've broken the law, we're then going to make you sit and watch them get knighted, given medals, promoted, just to really rub your faces in it. Like Sadiq Khan, who's just been knighted, hasn't he? By King Charles. We talk about King Charles's portrait.
Yeah, let's.
What did you make of the portrait?
Well, I don't think it was a particularly good portrait. I don't mind him as a portrait artist. I mean, I think he's done some reasonable artwork. He's not a terrible painter. I didn't like that one. I thought it was just ugly, and so I could understand why there was such outrage about it.
I mean, I thought it was quite odd how clashing the colour palette was. The sort of, obviously it's predominantly red, but then he's put all these sort of pinks and oranges in that really don't. Yeah. It's really unsettling, which I assume must be deliberate, but I thought, why would you want to make the viewer feel this way when looking at a portrait of the king?
Well, I think that's partly why it feels the kind of conspiratorial take, because in our gut we're going, well, you wouldn't do that, by accident. There's something deliberately ugly going on there.
So the normie take, if you like, or what I've heard from speaking to people, is there's a strange sort of connection with me in this portrait now that I find odd that I'll get onto. But from what I understand, the portrait was commissioned by the Drapers Guild. So it was commissioned to celebrate the fabric. They wanted him to focus on the fabric of the uniform, which is why he sort of took all the colours that are in that fabric and exploded them out onto the canvas. Is the mainstream explanation, I suppose you would say. And also that it was commissioned while he was still Prince Charles back in 2019 or 2018 or something. Then it obviously had to be changed once he was king, and he added in the monarch butterfly. And as you say, it's an odd-looking portrait, and it's not particularly nice for the viewer. And it did seem curious. And then all these conspiracy theories start about it. Then you have the... first of all, because it looks quite gory, doesn't it? It looks quite like an explosion of someone's guts on a canvas. Or, menstrual or something. And then you have the reflective pictures. Someone does a reflection and someone turns the reflection upside down, and you get these creepy Baphomet-looking images appearing, which I found interesting in the sense that, as you know, like we were saying earlier, most portraits of a person are a similar type of shape. They have a similar structure. If you take any of them and do that, you're probably going to get strange-looking images.
Yeah, especially it's abstract backgrounds.
Yes.
You can, and you when you mirror it, it's like, is it the Rorschach? What's it called? The
Rorschach. Yeah. Those things.
So, the brain sees stuff which isn't.
But then also thinking from a technical point of view, I just thought, but how on earth would you do this on purpose? How would you paint the portrait while also painting an image that would be reflected, unless you had some really elaborate camera system rigged up while you were painting that showed you the reflection? I don't know if you've ever tried doing. I used to really like those. When you can draw a face that you can then turn upside down and it has a different face. Yeah, I used to love doing those.
Yeah, I used to try and do it.
But that's really hard. Even doing that is really, really difficult. Yeah. So I just thought, I can't imagine how you would do this on purpose. So I thought it must be unintended, in the sense that I don't think the artist actually put these images in. Now, the other side is, are they there? Again, this is coming back to the deeper, big picture stuff. Are they there because of what's going on? Are they there as some kind of sign to try and show people that the royal family aren't that great, that Charles is supporting all this wicked stuff? Possibly.
So that's something that I hadn't thought of. So almost the opposite of what the conspiratorial kind of take on it is that somehow this is manifesting whether it's subconsciously or consciously, that truth is coming out. And I think that's quite interesting, because we do have this tendency to, like we said earlier, about wanting to be the cleverest conspiracy theorist and wanting to, and it tends to be a negative, because that's what there's not what sells, but it's the easiest to sell. It's just...
Well, again, and this might sound confusing, because I'm obviously trying to stress that overall this thing was planned. There are architects to all this stuff. it's carefully executed and everything, but there is a danger then that you stray into this mindset of absolutely everything is intentional.
Yeah.
Everything that seems suspicious has been done on purpose, and that is just not going to be the case, especially when it comes to something like a massive oil painting. That's, as you say, done in that abstract way. I mean, there are things in some of my cartoons that, not as far as I know, like, you know, dark symbolism, I don't mean that, but there will be things people pick up on sometimes and go, oh, this is really clever, look how he's done this in the background, and I'll think, oh, I didn't do that.
Yeah.
That was an accident.
Yeah.
Or that's where I spilled my tea or something, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, I think that does weirdly seem to fit with the picture though, or the message, or it does mean something that makes sense. Isn't that strange? I wonder if that was meant to be, you know.
Well, it's I remember listening to Mark Devlin at one of the Uprise and Shine, and he was talking about, you know Mark Devlin.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
So his main sort of thing that he's interested in is the music industry and the corruption within the music industry and how it's all been engineered.
Yeah.
You know, the whole counterculture
Beatles stuff.
But he was talking about the Jim Morrison's father, Jim Morrison of the Doors. His father was on the boat that started the Vietnam War.
That's right. Yeah.
I can't remember what it's called. Liberty, was it?
Yeah, well, loads of these characters had military parents or parents in the CIA.
That's right. Yeah. But as I was listening, I couldn't help. So he's got a very literal kind of take on that. So father, son, controlled, blah blah blah. You know, so that's the conspiracy, that it's all engineered. I don't know. I just kind of sat there and I was trying not to believe or disbelieve what he was saying. I just kind of sat with it and I thought, and what sort of came to me in that moment was a sense of, it might not be that black and white. It might be more of a archetypal drama being played out between this father and son.
Right.
And that there's something much more nuanced to it.
Yes.
And it might be completely, that might just be my fantasy sort of world, but it's just as compelling to me as an argument than this idea that everything in the 60s was corrupted and was controlled.
And every single artist knew exactly what they were doing. They were told exactly what to put in their lyrics. They were, I know, but that comes back to this same idea of, what do we mean by controlled?
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean everyone has been reared in some clinic and mind controlled, and then you hit on the right kind of personalities with the right kind of basic views or messages, and you promote them at the right time in the right way. All you have to do is nudge somebody sometimes, or make one little suggestion, and make sure that this song, they write a song and you think, this is great, this is exactly what we want young people to hear. Let's make sure this gets to number one, or whatever. Yeah, it's it can be more nuanced the way this stuff works, because also the other thing is, it's very risky to actually have all these people,
of course,
who you've told what to do, whose music is fake, who it's not really their lyrics. I mean, they're all going to get old and be a few days away from dying at some point, and that's a lot of work to keep them all quiet and make sure it doesn't come out. So yes, there's obviously an agenda at play, and what happened in the 60s did set a lot of things up for where we are now and all the rest of it. But
no doubt,
you do have to be careful not to just assume it was done in a ham-fisted way, if you like. Very explicit kind of, let's get all these people in a room somewhere in Nevada in an aircraft hangar and brief them about the next decade and what they all have to do. I'm not sure quite work like that.
And again, it's whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. What the reality of this thing is, but that, at least that model sort of gives us some kind of sense of responsibility, and that we're a part of this thing, and it's not just happening to us. And I do think that's kind of important to hold on to.
Yeah, and again, it only works because we are too blind to see through it.
Yeah.
We're too kind of indoctrinated. So we're too susceptible to just accept these ideas without questioning them, to follow the crowd, to just listen to music because it's trendy or whatever.
Yeah.
That's the only reason any of it is possible.
Yeah.
So
exactly. So in that sense, because that's I suppose where I differ from some of my friends and people in the movement. Actually, this thing that we're fighting or against, I think it's a bit like the Wizard of Oz. There's nothing there, because it's only the fact that that we
whatever
let it
is
happen.
there is only powerful because we give it power.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
and if I highly suspect that if you were able to find out exactly who's pulling all these strings and who came up with the idea to take us to where we want to go, you can find that they would be the most pathetic, shriveled old men you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah.
It's not like you'd find these kind of imposing demigods firing lasers from their eyes.
Yeah.
It'd be the most pathetic creatures you've ever seen in your life. The weakest, most ridiculous, scared disasters. And in that sense, it's not that now the fear, obviously, there's a lot of fear is based on ignorance. It's precisely because we don't quite know who's doing it, where it's coming from, that we're frightened, but also the power they have, the reason we perceive them as powerful is they seem able to make all these things happen. They've just made this absolutely horrific disaster occur. But it's only because of the way people behaved. It's because people gave them their power. They were happy to delegate responsibility. That's the big thing that happened.
Yeah.
Most people were happy to hand over responsibility for their lives, thinking, I've said this before, but they delegated responsibility thinking that would grant them freedom. And the opposite happens.
Yeah.
The more responsibility you take, the freer you are. That's what the big lesson everyone should take away from this.
Yeah.
But coming back to the Prince Charles thing, it's so Jonathan Yeo, who painted the portrait, I obviously when that was unveiled and there was the clip online of him with the king unveiling the painting, a friend of mine very, very quickly took the clip and just superimposed my portrait of Charles that had already been out for a few months. So it looked as if that's what they were unveiling, and it was really funny because obviously he left all the audio on there. Yeah. So, you can hear Jonathan Yeo saying, what if it's probably quite different from last time you saw it? Yes. What have you done? And he sort of points at it, he gets sausage fingers, points at it, goes, well, you've done something here. And he's sort of pointing at the Jimmy Savile genitalia I gave him. Yeah. It just worked really well. And that everybody saw that clip. And then I then met somebody a couple of weeks later who knew Jonathan Yeo quite well, and who tells me that he's actually fairly on side with being opposed to this stuff, and he absolutely loves my work. Yeah. He loved that clip. He thought it was hilarious, and I'm thinking, what's going on? What's going on? Yeah. So I don't know, and I don't know, that might not be true. I don't really see the point of lying about it.
No.
Well, in fact, this person, so I think this person I was with could tell I was a bit doubtful. So she basically messaged Jonathan Yeo on her phone, said, I'm with Bob Moran, and then this message came back saying, oh, love Bob. I think he's great.
Yeah.
So
this is what I
surreal.
like. This is what I like, because I think it is more complex than people, and I think this is where people need to just be a little bit more measured and a little bit less fear-mongery, because it was all over. This guy's satanic. They're putting this. This is.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe again, we don't know the truth, but it seems that I would suspect it is more like you're saying. These things just happen sometimes, and
Yeah.
like we recognize patterns, so we're looking for it. So we don't trust these people. We know that they're up to no good, but that doesn't. We look silly if we jump to conclusions.
I mean, I suppose
it's like boy.
I don't know how kind of awake or whatever, however you want to describe it, you were before 2020.
I was lucky because I read David Icke in '97.
Oh, okay. Right, so it's quite unlikely that had you been approached to paint the king in 2018, you would have jumped at the chance. Do you think you would have gone, nah, actually, not my thing?
Well, I might have done it just for a laugh.
You might have done it for a laugh. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But, I'd certainly 2018 Bob, if I'd been asked to do like commissioned by Buckingham Palace or something, I'd have been, oh yeah, of course, great. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
And then if that job is going on for the next 4 or 5 years and your mindset suddenly changes, what do you then do? I mean, how easy is it then to get out of it once you're in that situation? Can you go, actually, I've realised you're, paedophile sheltering nutcases now, and I've burnt the canvas. I think you're going to be thinking, what are they going to do to me if I do that,
Yeah.
You're sort of trapped, aren't you?
Yeah.
It's difficult. It's a difficult balance. Obviously, people need to be vigilant. The whole point is we're saying don't be deceived.
Yes.
Open your eyes. At the same time, don't be governed by fear and paranoia.
Yeah.
Don't see intentional meaning everywhere, absolutely everywhere you look, and don't assume that absolutely everybody within a certain radius of a certain institution or certain people are therefore definitely bought and corrupt and part of the agenda, because it just doesn't work like that, and it probably couldn't have worked like that. It wouldn't have succeeded if that's the way things were.
No. But then, even saying that, you're in danger of being called an apologist,
Well, I know.
You can work for the Telegraph, you would say that,
I know, yeah.
Obviously controlled up, but...
Yeah, I still get that from people. Well, I still have people who say, "Oh, you were there at the Telegraph, and you were. You must have known. You must have known everything. They must have told you. Everything that was going on." Of course, I hadn't worked in the office for a good couple of years by the time when I started, and my communication was basically a couple of phone calls a day. That's all I would glean from what was being talked about.
Yeah,
and
well, you would say that, though, wouldn't you?
I would say that, of course. Yeah.
But it does show the kind of level of paranoid delusion, that a lot of people unfortunately just end up in, and I feel for them. I get it, when we've, all like you're saying about the trauma that we've gone through,
Yeah, but I'm really open about the stuff I got wrong and the things I regret. Yeah. And people try and catch me out saying like, look at this one you did in March 2020 or whatever, and I think, but first of all, that was when I was at the paper, so it's a different situation, and it's before I really understood what we were in, what the nature of it. Yeah. And I don't. It's not, and then I think if I was really kind of controlled, whatever, then. Once I'm totally independent, why would I do?
It's all part of the plan.
It's very elaborate, isn't it?
It's a very elaborate ruse that you're pulling off.
Okay.
Yeah, you just dig in a hole now. I just stop
digging. Yeah. Well, someone will be doing mirror reflections of this picture as soon as you finished it. Yeah.
But it's been quite interesting because just the few that we've done of this, maybe 5 or 6. So meeting people who are sort of in the, Kate Shumarani, Jackie Devoy, Richard Vobes, and they've all been called shills.
Yeah.
you know, and then you meet them and it's like, I don't, you know, this is crazy.
Yeah.
And in fact, we were, you know, even like the tiny little bit of local, because we were in this band in Brighton, you know, someone actually made a video saying that I was David Tennant acting a part as the yeah. I mean, he was
Right.
6'2", so I don't know how I pulled that one off, but
David Tennant is awful though. He's like one of the most.
yeah. Well, he was saying that I was playing this. David Tennant was playing me as this
Okay.
minuscule figure in the Brighton freedom movement, you know? And it's just the level of craziness that...
Yeah. And there's also anyone, you know, there's a thing, anyone who's managed to retain any level of notoriety or success must therefore be controlled in some way or is a shill.
Yeah.
I mean...
Well, Miri puts it, doesn't she? Miri says, you know...
if you know their name, they're in the game.
Yeah, which, you know, I get where she's coming from, but...
Yeah. But then, see, I would say it's more if everyone knows their name, they might be in the game. But you see, most people in this movement know who I am now.
Yeah.
If they don't know who I am, they've certainly seen at least 3 or 4 of my cartoons over the last few years. But outside of that, you know, there are still plenty of normal people who watch the news out in the street who wouldn't have a clue who I was and who wouldn't necessarily have seen any of my... Apart from, there have been a few that have kind of broken through, I think, like the King Charles one, when that came out, it did feel like almost everyone in the country saw it.
Yeah.
But... you know, I've been so lucky, and because when I lost my job, I really thought this could be it. This might be over now. I don't really see where I'm going to go from here. I know I'm not going to get a job at another paper, and I don't want one anyway. And I just thought, well, all I can do is keep going. I can embrace the fact that I'm free now to say all the things I want to say, and I can just hope that there are enough people out there who want me to carry on and who will support me.
Yeah.
And it's worked, you know, and I have a bigger audience now than I had with the paper. My work gets shared way more widely and people value it, you know, and I sort of, in those kind of couple of years after leaving the paper, because I create originals, which again, like most cartoonists now don't work traditionally, it's digital, so there are no original paintings. But I sort of, for practical reasons, aside from anything else, while I was at the paper, I started doing everything by hand. And sometimes I would sell an original painting at the paper, maybe like, 2 or 3 times a year. So a politician or a politician's sibling or whatever, someone who worked for them would buy an original for £300 or £400. And then in the last few years, there have been people trying to collect my originals who are quite wealthy, and that you just have like a couple of them competing at one time, and the prices, I mean, art is crazy, isn't it? It's really stupid how this money works with art. Yeah. But I started selling the originals for quite a lot of money. Yeah. And that's, that's been my only income, really. Yeah. And obviously I lost all the security of the salary and everything. But that was really good, because I thought, well, I only need to sell some paintings and I can give other stuff away.
Yeah, I've noticed it.
As much as possible. Yeah. And I would never charge anyone for seeing my work. And anyone who wants to use it for a campaign or, something they're doing, I don't charge anybody, because I want the message. The whole point is I want the message shared. I want it to get out there. But again, you do get this pushback of, look, you've done all right, haven't you? You must be a shill because you're...
Yeah, of course. Well, just because people are awake to the agenda doesn't mean they haven't got a whole load of jealousy and crap that they like to dish out. It doesn't mean there are any kind of spiritual enlightenment or wisdom necessarily that comes with it.
I appreciate that, money is nonsense. It's a shame that we're in this system. The financial system is awful, and it'd be great if we could get to a point where we aren't governed by this same money system. But for now, we're in it, and if I couldn't make money to support my family, I wouldn't be able to keep doing it. I'm not going to carry this on as a hobby, because I'd have to go and do something else, and that's I don't know. We could get onto memes here, I suppose. But
you love memes, don't you?
I absolutely love memes. Yeah, can't get enough of them. No, I do like them.
No, I know you do.
I do genuinely like memes. I think
you're just jealous of them, aren't you?
I'm really jealous. Yeah. I think they're great, and they've, over the last few years, they've really become a thing. They've come into their own, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I think it's fantastic that there are all these sort of this army of meme warriors or whatever who create these things, and I find a lot of them really funny and really powerful. But part of the reason that they're so effective and funny is precisely because they are, largely they don't require any skill to make. In fact, the less skillful they are, usually the funnier they are. Yeah. They can be done really, really quickly. And part of the point of them is you don't know who made this, and that's the point. No one knows who made it. Because anyone can make them.
Yeah.
Right. And anybody can finish their 9 to 5, come home, look at Twitter, and quickly knock out a meme, and it's hilarious, and they get, it goes viral or whatever. And then someone else takes the same meme the next day and changes the text to apply to the new story, and it's funny. And part of the reason it's funny is because everyone knows they just recycled the meme from yesterday. Yeah. And that's great. But that is a really, really different thing from what I do in so many different ways. And it does bug me a bit when I get called a meme maker or my stuff's described as memes, or when people take my stuff and treat it like a meme and change the words or and then and the thing is, I wouldn't mind if someone did that and I looked at it and I thought, oh, that's so much funnier than what I did, but it's always they've never improved on it, and I always think, why did you bother doing that? And if I ever sometimes I'll sort of politely try and engage with the person and say, oh, I don't know if you knew, but this was my cartoon, or why did you take my signature off, or whatever it is. And they'll say things like, that's the way memes work, my friend, you obviously don't understand, this is, and I'm thinking, okay, but that's not it's very hard because you sound arrogant. I don't want to come across as up my own arse, you know. Sometimes you think, this is my job. I spent 20 years learning how to do this, and it's that took me 5 hours or 6 hours or whatever. Please don't equate it with something that took you 30 seconds. And it's not. It's also aside from my own perspective in that way, I think it would be a shame, as much as I like these things, if they ended up killing what I do, people like me, people who are actually producing artwork in their own style, that's sort of in a consistent style and can be beautiful and evocative in a way that memes can't ever be. If the sort of expansion of memes meant that there's no room for somebody, I don't believe that will happen.
I can't see how that would happen.
I don't feel threatened in that way.
Are you sure? I'm not convinced.
Well, it's difficult to explain, I suppose, isn't it? Because I do like. I'm not kind of being dishonest when I say I like them. I do. I really enjoy them. It's a strange thing. It's
You
also
sort of sound a bit like a racist who's like telling me they've got lots of black friends. That's what you're sounding like at the moment.
I've got loads of my friends are meme makers. Actually, a few of them.
Loads of my friends are flat earthers.
Yeah. What I find hard sometimes is the speed of it, because I'm...
Again, you're just sounding jealous.
I will think, I'll have an idea for a cartoon about something that's just happened. I'll go on and it's been memed, and you think, okay, I'll have to do something else. Yeah.
I was like that when photography was invented. What's
Looking great for your age, Jake. Yeah. But okay, let's get on to what I... This is sort of connected to the meme thing, but I really hate more than the memes is the AI generated images that are just everywhere now because they've made it so easy. Yeah. And I just think that they're rank, they're disgusting. And I think it's particularly I feel or disappointed when people on our side, if you like, keep generating these AI images.
I can't really think of any offhand now, any sort of examples, but AI is intrinsically problematic.
Because I think the way it works is, you type into whatever program you're using, Keir Starmer and the riots.
Oh yeah, now I know.
Kamala Harris is a communist, and it will just generate this image. And it just looks horrible and like it's been made by a computer. Yeah. And they aren't funny. A lot of the time it doesn't really look like the person, because what it does is it does a Google image search of different photos and just splices them all together. What you end up with is not usually a good likeness.
I saw one of Big Mike and she looked quite attractive, so that was
how you know.
Obviously a failure.
It's AI.
Did I say she? Sorry.
Pardon?
Did I say she?
Slip of the tongue.
In uncertain times, one asset continues to rise, and that's gold. More than just a precious metal, gold is a globally recognized Tier 1 asset with no counterparty risk. Its history of preserving value during turbulent periods makes it a trusted store of wealth, and with central banks and nation-states buying record vaults, it's clear gold is more than an investment, it's financial security. Secure yours today with Knights Bullion. Visit knightsbullion.com or call 01789 266 595.
I love creating real things. Physical objects. Yeah. And I love the fact that, because I use watercolour, it's kind of most of the time once you've committed and done it. I don't know if it's easy for you, Jake, because you can paint back over, you can keep changing.
That's why I stopped using watercolour. I started with watercolour.
I have to commit and I can't really do anything if I don't like the colour.
Hardcore watercolour.
But I like that. Obviously, it's a lot quicker as well. You couldn't do newspaper cartoons in oils. It would be.
You ever used gouache?
Yeah, I did start out with gouache.
Gouache, okay.
I don't know how you is that right?
Gouache.
Yeah. Michelle, Mike.
Yeah.
I did, and I couldn't get, for some reason. It always looked really milky. I couldn't get vibrant colours with gouache. I never liked it.
Gouache, actually. You're fine.
Gouache. And then I started playing around with watercolours, and I found these it's P.H. Martin Hydrus watercolour inks. So it's like it's like more concentrated watercolours. You can get really vibrant colours, and they also they come in these glass bottles with like a little pipette in the lid, which is quite, if you do want to get a bit splattery, it's quite useful for that. You can flick it and squeeze it and
pretend you're Gerald Scarfe.
When I'm still pretending I'm Gerald Scarfe, yeah. What was I saying? Oh yeah, AI and things. So, like I said earlier, I love it when there's a happy accident or there's a mistake. I didn't intend that, the way the paints have bled into each other, or a mark that you didn't mean to make, an ink smudge or whatever. It's not just that they sometimes throw up really nice results that you didn't intend. It's that the viewer can instinctively tell this was done by another human being with their hands, that holding a brush in their hand, and that still appeals to us for now. We still connect with an image in a different way.
I don't think that will change. I think that's just inbuilt in us. That's intrinsic.
It's that the problem with the AI is I don't think it's ever going to be able to understand the beauty of imperfection. It's just going to strive towards more and more hyper-realistic, perfect gloss finish. Eventually it will learn how many fingers we have. And that we don't, in a crowd of people, every other person doesn't have a demon face. It might work out that stuff, but it's all going to look so hyper-real that it won't be able to mimic those human errors, those flaws that actually we find so much beauty in,
Yeah, I think AI will. How to put it to someone? AI will hasten our rejection of the mediocre. It will just. I kind of see it from a sort of positive way.
I like that. Yeah, I do like that.
Yeah, I like that.
But actually, I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday, actually, who's works in Hollywood, and we immediately got onto this thing about how much they're now using AI in films, to generate backgrounds for films, to write the scripts, because there's so much more demand now. People are consuming so much more. They just have to churn it out, and they can't churn it out quickly enough without using this AI stuff. So it was really interesting because it was this total acknowledgement that doesn't matter, quality doesn't matter. People are just spending 50 or 60 hours a week now in America watching TV. They don't even care what they're watching. We just have to keep producing enough for them to watch. Yeah. So we're using AI. And it's, sort of saying, look, it's just inevitable. It's here now, and we're going to be using it. And I just don't think... Oh, that's what he said. You can't put the genie back in the bottle, which I thought was interesting. And I think, well, maybe not, but what you can do while there's still time is maybe show people that the genie isn't as magical as they
but I think
actually we're still more powerful than the genie is, and we still have the capacity to make things beautiful. Yeah. Because I was sort of, he was saying about the background thing. We get AI to just generate a background now for a film, whereas in years ago, it would have taken a team of artists days to paint a background. And I'm thinking, and they were really beautiful. And even when you watch those old films where it's very obviously a painted background, that's incredible. You think that is incredible. I can't believe people painted that. It's not jarring. You don't look at it and kind of go, oh, I can tell it's a painted background. How crap. I won't watch this film again.
No, it's like the sort of stop frame animation from
this is what I brought.
It sort of has a beauty to it, which
because you can see the thumbprints on Wallace's nose in those Aardman things. They can actually almost see the person touching the plasticine and manipulating it, and they took 5 years to make a feature length film. So
Vicky worked on Fantastic Mr. Fox, so I got to see.
Oh, I love that. I really like that.
Doing the moving it one tiny millimetre each frame, and it's incredible. And I think people
the design of that was great. The way they reduced it to that minimal colour palette where everything's yellows and oranges worked really well, I thought.
Although Wes Anderson, he apparently signed that petition to get Polanski.
Oh, did he?
Yeah. Well, who didn't, I think.
All these things are tarnished now, I suppose. But I do, I was sort of trying to point out, to be fair, this guy agreed. It was almost like he totally agreed with where I was coming from, but he was just said, this is my industry now and I have to go along with it. But I say, if you're going to do a film in that way, it's going to take you 5 years. You're not going to have anyone working on it who doesn't love the subject, love the story, really care about what they're doing and want to do it as well as they possibly can. You're not going to just have some throwaway script. You're going to refine the script and the story so it's really funny, really engaging, precisely because the process takes that long. Yeah. There is value in stuff taking a long time and requiring a lot of manpower that we're forgetting in our hurry to just produce crap to satisfy the people who want crap sprayed in their faces 50 hours a week. Yeah.
But again, then it comes back to that responsibility, doesn't it? So if that's what you want, that's what you're going to get.
Ultimately, it's all very well trying to talk to someone who works in Hollywood saying you should not be using this stuff, but it'd be better to make audiences realise, don't watch it.
Yeah, which is what
say those this is crap, we don't want this.
Are doing in a way, isn't it? Because you're saying, well, there is an alternative to that,
Yeah. The smoking rabbit hole is pretty interesting. I'm not quite sure, because I smoke. Didn't used to smoke very much, and it's increased over the last few years.
Oh, okay.
And there are all these things. I mean, I don't know if you remember, there was this thing right at the start where there were these studies started to come out where they were saying, so initially they'd said, obviously this is a virus, it's a respiratory virus, so anyone who smokes is at massive risk if you're a smoker. And then these studies started to come out saying, actually, smokers don't seem to be affected. Yeah. For some reason, smoking seems to mean, and now leaving aside whatever you think about, was there any virus at all, or whatever, there's various other things. I've listened to other people who say there's something about nicotine that seems to counteract other toxins or protect you against other toxins affecting you. And tobacco, I think there's this idea that smoking tobacco, if it's pure and organic, is probably beneficial in some ways. The reason cigarettes that we have now are so unhealthy is because it's tobacco filled with all these other chemicals and additives to keep. It's like I smoke rolling tobacco, but the lots of the chemicals in it are to keep it moist. And if you get organic tobacco, the problem is it's so dry and then it gets even drier. Right. And you realise that a lot of the stuff they put into the other stuff is so it retains its moisture. But that's all the bad stuff that's the chemicals that aren't good for you. But I just think, well, the Native Americans basically invented smoking tobacco, and they didn't do very much that was bad for them. No. They seemed quite clued up about how to live, and I think they would have realised if it was really unhealthy and they all died of lung cancer.
Yeah, you'd think so, yeah.
I would think. So, that's the smoking rabbit hole.
Yeah. I haven't got around to trying it yet. I've never smoked in my life, so I don't know if that would be something like
You've never ever smoked? What, you've never even tried?
No.
Wow.
Oh, no, weed. A little bit.
Okay.
But that was it.
I've never had a cigarette?
I've never had a cigarette, no.
Yeah, I tried smoking a pipe when I was at art college. I thought I could get away with it, and I really couldn't. It didn't work at all.
Yeah. I think you would now, definitely. Maybe Richard Vobes started smoking a pipe.
Oh, yeah. I
could imagine you and him having a pipe together, sitting around it.
Do you, random tangent here, do you find it easier to paint somebody who's wearing glasses, or is it annoying?
You know what? I've had 3, I think 50% of the ones I've done so far have been wearing glasses, and I do actually find it easier.
Yeah.
Quite good landmark.
Something to frame the face
and really
build it around.
Yeah.
I have a thing at the moment I can't, because Keir Starmer's started wearing glasses quite recently. That's always a bit annoying. Right. And then he started wearing them, it seemed like all the time, and now it's quite on and off. And now I can't decide whether to put glasses on him or not.
Okay.
Because sometimes if you're caricaturing somebody, if they aren't someone like who's always worn glasses and is kind of known, for example, Michael Gove has always worn big frame glasses, so it's part of the caricature. But when someone suddenly starts wearing glasses, it can really interfere with the way you capture the likeness.
Yeah.
Or if they grow a beard, that's really annoying sometimes as well.
It doesn't happen to me halfway through. Someone starts
growing
a beard.
Do you keep copies of all the portraits you've done? So you can look back on them and...
Yeah, well, I photograph everything.
Yeah.
And we were thinking maybe to have a sort of exhibition at some point and maybe try and get you all along.
That would be great.
In a room together, that would be quite amusing.
Yeah. I think there's real value. It's not something I used to kind of do much, but to just take a big chunk of your work and look at it together.
Yeah.
That was what I sort of really valued in doing the show, and then the book was looking at it as a collection, and seeing how it all fits together, and it basically helps you to spot your weaknesses, what you're getting right and what you still need to work on, and where you you can see what you've improved, things like that. It's really useful. And then I think as well, because of the nature of how my stuff is shared now all over the place, and it goes over all these different groups, or different social media platforms, and then you get people print them out and stick them up in places, or they get shown on a podcast or whatever. People are sort of aware of my work, and they've seen a lot of them, but then everyone will always say, "Oh, I didn't know that one was one of yours as well."
Okay.
They don't, or there's lots they haven't seen, and I just thought I really want to. First with the show and then with the book, I just want to present it all together, not just because it's all come from the same person, but because there is actually a kind of narrative running through it all. It's telling a story.
Yeah.
That is, I guess you could say, the alternative narrative, and then it's also my thought process as I've gone through and, shifted my subject matter and my targets or whatever, and developed my thinking on the whole thing. As I've, and that's interesting, I think, from a starting point of being totally in the mainstream media, trusting the system essentially, and doing that kind of, I'm a satirist and I'm a little bit edgy and dangerous, but I'm still in this mainstream paper. Going from there to ending up where I am now, which is where I essentially would almost say that mainstream political satire is a total fraud. It's not real. And the only way to do effective satire when it matters is to be on the outside. You've got to be independent and on the periphery looking in. The whole jester inside the court thing, it doesn't really work when it really matters, when you really need satire to be effective.
Yeah.
That's not enough,
Did you, when you were in that environment, did you, your spidey sense kick in, that the whole kind of privileged, was it, how did it feel being in a was it obvious that there was a sense of privilege in that kind of environment? In what, in
a journalistic, being in a newsroom, or specifically the Telegraph?
Just generally, really.
Because it was interesting, when I first joined the Telegraph in 2011, I'd expected there to be a lot more tweed and plummy accents and public school alumni.
Yeah.
And actually, there's a fair bit of that. You know, you see the odd red corduroy trousers walking around and stuff. But the people I worked with on the comment desk, most of them were, you know, what you describe as ordinary people who had the same kind of background that I did.
Yeah.
They weren't what you describe as posh or elitist or whatever, you know.
You're a little bit posh, though.
I'm a little bit posh. I did go to public school, but it was a cheap one. I only went there because I failed my 11 plus. I was meant to go to grammar school.
Let you off then.
And then,
but not just the kind of the class structure, but you know, in terms of more agenda type, because you know, I always think, like we were saying earlier about one of the reasons this kind of the agenda carries on is not necessarily that people are controlled, but they're comfortable and they're. It's hard to put my finger on. I've written a story about it, but this being sucked in, not necessarily signing a contract. Yeah, I'm selling my soul to the devil, but being sucked in. Yeah. And almost intoxicating, sort of. I know what you mean. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I know what you're getting at now. Yes. When I first went to work in a newsroom, you know, and it's this really exciting environment. Yeah. You've got all these desks of people rushing about. You've got big TV screens streaming the news coming in. You've got all the FTSE 100 and everything up on the wall. You've got people going off for lunches with ambassadors, royalty, important people. You have the sort of meetings taking place. And in the early days, I was invited into the conferences, you know, in the morning and afternoon, where they decide what's on the front page, right? What are our leader articles going to be? All that stuff. That was useful for me. I'd just go in and sit in the corner with my sketchbook and write down themes for what I needed to do a cartoon for. And it's really thrilling. And when you're in there and some big event is happening and you find out about it before anyone else, and they're sort of, you know, there are these arguments about how the paper should portray it, who we're going to interview, who should we get to write for it. You feel really like part of this important machine that is kind of governing everyone's lives or keeping everyone's world turning around. Yeah. And then you go, you know, on your way home, you're on the train or the tube or whatever, and there's someone looking at your cartoon in the paper or reading an article, and you think, I know how that was put together, and I know the arguments that went into that article. I know the person actually wanted to write this, but the lawyers wouldn't let them. All that stuff, and there's no getting away from the fact that that's thrilling. It makes you feel important. You think, I'm part of this almost like a secret club. Yeah. But it's sort of, you all, at the same time, you kind of convince yourself, I have this massive responsibility, knowing this stuff, you know. I suppose at the end of the day, I was doing something very specific, and my job is to do a cartoon, you know, and I'm not party to all of these exchanges and lunches and meetings and things. But I didn't know about a lot of them. And very early on, you hear things like, don't, for example, the owners or whoever it is, or this sponsor, or someone who we need to do an interview with likes UKIP, has decided they really like UKIP. So we don't want any more criticism of UKIP. We're not going to, you know, and I'd be told, just don't do any UKIP cartoons for a bit. Stuff like that happened all the time. Right. But I suppose you just think, well, yeah, it's not surprising that this is the way it works. I assume it must be okay. And you have this relationship where, I mean, I think it used to be a bit different, but because by the time I started, newspapers were
in such trouble financially. They didn't know how to make money. For the first few years I was there, it's almost comedic the way they kept going back and forth, trying these different ways of making online subscriptions work.
Yeah.
Trying to totally reinvent themselves. As you know, one week they were going to be BuzzFeed, and the next week they're going to be sort of back to old-fashioned Telegraph. And they didn't know what they were doing. They brought in Americans who just completely arsed everything up, and they went through this kind of existential crisis, newspapers, and especially the Telegraph, where I think their average subscriber age was something like 92. You know, it was ridiculous.
About the death rate of COVID, or the average age of death from COVID.
Yeah, exactly. So they then become much more dependent on this relationship between politicians, where, you know, they have to be at those news conferences. They have to maintain those connections where they can find out what's coming down the pipeline if they want to have exclusives and things. So this situation, I think it was probably always there, but it became much more a case of, if you come along to a news conference and you ask a question we don't like, we're just not going to invite you to the next one. And then you're screwed.
Yeah.
So then, and by the time we got to the pandemic, that was definitely a big problem, where it's just, and I think it's the same in America, it's the same everywhere. You stand up and ask an important question that needs to be asked that they don't want you to ask.
Yeah.
They're not going to invite you to the next thing. Or they might, you know, they might not take you out for lunch and give you a little tidbit about what might be coming along.
Yeah.
Which is not how journalism should be at all, but it's the way it works. And there's also this other thing that I only really started to pick up on once we were in the pandemic nonsense, whereas this idea that sometimes this is how they'll cover for the fact that they're just hiding something, or but there is this idea, I think, that we know this, or we know this is going to happen, or we know this is what's actually happening, but we're not going to tell people because they aren't ready for it yet. You know, that people aren't ready to hear about this. But I don't understand this idea of waiting for people to be ready. That's, you know, and I sort of wasn't prepared to do that anymore. Because that's how the mainstream system operates a lot of the time. It was interesting because when I started to just do my own thing and put out my own work, a lot of it seemed to be really ahead of, you know, people would start saying, I think this is a bit over the top. You know, like, I don't think we're there yet. Because all I was doing was not waiting for when apparently people would be ready, or it was time to reveal this stuff. Oh, that's true, I'll say it, I'll draw it, I'll put it out.
Yeah.
And then people would kind of go, oh, how did you know? You know, once the narrative catches up, people are like, oh, you're prophetic, how did you know? You think, no, I'm not. It was this, I drew it because it was obvious at the time. I just wasn't waiting. And this whole thing was about waiting. And there was always this sense, I got this sense from other journalists and editors at the paper, almost this acknowledgement that you're right, and we know that all this stuff you're warning about and the reasons you're saying it's wrong and what's going to happen, we know that that's going to happen, but we are, I don't know, either they've been instructed, or again, they were just trapped in this weird operation mechanism of, it's going to be at least 2 years before we start putting this stuff in the papers. You know, that's the way it has to happen. We're going to let all of this happen, doing nothing. There's going to be no investigative journalism. We're not going to ask any of these questions. And then at a very particular point, we're suddenly going to start putting it all in the papers as if we're doing proper journalism again now.
Right.
Now that it's happened, and say, oh, look at this was wrong. Oh, look at these, you know, WhatsApp messages we've uncovered or whatever that you all knew about when they were happening. It's ridiculous. And it's always after the fact. When you look back, every single thing is the disaster happens, the damage is done, and then suddenly the journalists are exposing it. We found out that, and in every one of those instances, you can find ordinary members of the public who were saying at the time while it was happening, this is a lie, this is going to be a disaster, this shouldn't be happening. And I said, it's funny and frustrating now, the kind of stuff that the Telegraph publish. It's all the things that I was saying on social media at the time that they were threatening to fire me for, and then did fire me for, essentially. And I saw it at the time I was fired. I did say to the guy, I never met him before, but it was from the corporate side of the business anyway. And I did say, look, I promise you all of these things are going to be in your paper within the next couple of years, everything I'm saying. And he said something like, well, that's I'm not part of the editorial side or anything. And, they hold stuff back all the time, and they know. It's not like these people at the newspapers don't know, as the disaster's unfolding, that it's going to be a disaster, but for whatever reason, they're either programmed or instructed to wait.
Yeah. But just to be clear, you're not saying they're aware of the agenda, like
listen,
kind of full.
I know there were meetings at Downing Street. I know all the editors from the major newspapers and magazines went to these essentially secret meetings at various points at Downing Street, where they were briefed by Whitty and Vallance and told, there's going to be another lockdown, or we're going to bring in masks, or whatever it is, or we're actually going to roll out the jabs to everyone down to babies, whatever it was, before the public knew. And they'd be, from what I understand, they'd be not explicitly told, but it would be implied that if you want to keep getting all this advertising money, it would be, we'd really like it if you just put in a few articles and some leader articles about how actually we need this lockdown, or whatever it is, or actually it turns out masks do work, or whatever they needed to. And they all went away and did it because they needed the money. And it's not like they went away and their front page is, there are secret meetings happening between the government and at which the Prime Minister told me he wasn't even in charge, and Chris Whitty's running the country, which a proper journalist who cares about the truth would do. None of them cared about that, because they were all, I think, again, just thinking, isn't this exciting? We've just been to a secret meeting. We know there's going to be a lockdown and nobody else does, and now we're going to gently seed the idea, get the public ready to accept this lockdown when it comes along, and just think, the story here is that the Prime Minister's not running the country. Did none of you see that?
I mean, I think, like, say with the jabs, we will speculate about who knew what they were, and what was involved. And I had a friend who claimed to know someone at Pfizer, and he said, they were designed as a population reduction, a fertility drug, really.
Or an infertility.
Sorry, infertility.
Yeah. I'm not sure many people have.
we got it the wrong way around.
It's extraordinary for their libido having this. No. I think.
So, the point I was going to make is, if you were being generous with your theorising, you could say that, yes, people knew this was a programme. It was an agenda. It was designed to get all these people to take this thing. Apart from, if you're being ultra generous, you could say that was all it was. People have been convinced that there's too many people. We need to, what was that Channel 4 programme, drama? utopia.
Oh, utopia, yeah.
So that script, basically.
Yeah.
But the most generous form of that is that there was no there's no bad intention.
We've got to do this or it's going to be the end of humanity.
We've got to do it, but
and we can't do it overtly because if we
Exactly.
come out and say we're going to kill 2 billion people,
Yeah.
it won't work.
Yeah.
So we have to find a way of doing this. Yeah.
Yeah.
I entertain that for a few minutes at a certain point. Yeah.
Or you could say the majority of people who were involved in developing it were unaware, or even that some people knew that it was going to be very dangerous, but the sell to those promoting it was that scenario. So the sell, in which case, in which case, a lot of people who promoted it might have actually been thinking, "I'm really saving the world here."
This is complicated, I think, because I don't actually think. I think you can go quite high up the ladder of power and influence without necessarily getting. I think it's quite a long time before you get to people who fully understand what this was all about, what it was for, and what the end goal was. I mean, there's certainly a number of levels of people who just believed it all and thought there genuinely was a pandemic and billions of people were going to die. There's another level of probably people who maybe subscribe to the idea that a bit of control, a bit more compliance would be good, and we can make loads of money.
Yeah,
and that's good. There may be one or two people slightly higher up, as you say, who genuinely buy into the idea of overpopulation and who think that they're doing a good thing. At the end of the day.
I'm only theorising. I'm not.
It's like Thanos in Marvel comics, basically.
Yeah.
A lot of these villains, fictional villains that are interesting because there's a conflict and they're kind of doing something in the knowledge that it's not entirely good, but they feel like they have to, because if they don't, it will be worse. The outcome will be even worse. So there's that possibly someone like Bill Gates might be there. I don't know. Maybe he does seem pretty evil, but possibly he believes that. I don't know. But I think, then eventually you do get to a point where there are people who know it's complete bollocks that there are too many people in the world, and it's not that their mission is not just to reduce the population, not just because of the grief and the trauma, the harm it will cause, the chaos it will cause. There's a deeper motivation. And with the jabs, I'm not sure. The problem is we still don't know exactly what they were designed to do exactly. I mean, it's true that you don't make this stuff by accident. What I can say, what I'm absolutely sure of, is that nobody set out in a rush to make a vaccine for a virus they believed in and accidentally made whatever the hell this is.
Yeah.
Like Mike Eden and several other people who I really respect and admire and trust have said there is no way you set out to make a vaccine to prevent people from being ill and accidentally make this. You only make something like this if it's what you always intended to make, and you always intended it to do all the things that it's doing, right? So I think the right way around to look at it is somebody made this stuff first to specifically do what it's doing, and then said, how do we get as many people as possible to take this? And then, a team of very smart psychologists said, well, the best way of guaranteeing it in the way you want to do it, which is where people essentially, agree to it and everything, is to stage this whole pandemic narrative. And you do it in this way, you do it in this specific time frame, you use this propaganda, you use these hypnosis techniques, you break down these psychological barriers people have, And that should guarantee that at least 50% of people have this stuff. And they said, great, let's do it. Now, obviously, part of what this is doing is massively harming people and killing them. But I'm not completely sure that is the only thing it's supposed to do. There are quite a few different speculative ideas of what else might be in this stuff, and like I said, the problem is no one, apart from whoever actually designed it, which again I don't think it actually was the pharmaceutical companies.
No,
I think they were handed the stuff and just said, here it is, mass produce it. Because I don't understand the business model of killing off 50% of your customers and risking turning everyone in the world against your products forever. So, but, I think it's possible that the genetic element of these things mean that it's kind of initiating some kind of process in people's bodies to do something, to change something fundamental about them, or prepare them for something else coming later. And quite a lot of people, because of their genetics, their age, their health, it's sort of compatible, if you like.
Yeah.
It doesn't kill them, they don't die, but it doesn't mean nothing's happening. It's just that this process is able to carry on doing whatever it's designed to do. And probably, that might explain why the deaths are so staggered. It might explain why some people die after 5 days later, some people die 6 months later.
Yeah.
Some people can have 12 jabs and they're fine.
Yeah.
Another person has the second jab and dies the next week, or, it's... So, I don't think... The thing that frustrates me sometimes is this idea that, that event happened and now it's over. And yes, lots of people died, but everyone who was ever going to die is now dead. If you had your last jab 2 years ago, you're fine. You don't need to worry. And very sadly, I don't think that's the case. But when you look at it from that point of view, when you say, you start with, we've got these jabs, how do we get them into people in this particular way? And you look at everything from that way round, it suddenly becomes very, very clever and competent. In fact, I think I would challenge anyone to come up with a more efficient, clever way of doing this, if that's your plan. Therefore, I don't really understand how people could still say it was just sort of this organic incompetence that got out of control. No. And another thing that I find interesting is the mandate. This comes back to the Trump thing. So one of the big things you hear with the Trump stuff is, well, he never mandated it. The important thing is he didn't mandate it. You get this so much about other people as well. There was this idea that sprung up early on in the rollout of the important thing is it's not mandated. And I was immediately thinking, what do you mean it's not mandated? It's really important people have a choice. And I say, no, it's not. No one should have a choice. This shouldn't exist. It shouldn't, if you make like a baby chew and you lace it with cyanide and you just say, this is a safe baby chew, give it to a child. You don't say, the important thing is he can choose whether or not to put it in his mouth. It's not, no, it shouldn't be on the market. It was the same with these things. But immediately there was this idea of all that matters is mandates. And what that meant was lots of the movement then, lots of the protests that sprung up were really like, we're just protesting the mandates. We're not against the vaccine, while everyone's still getting jabbed. It allowed a lot of these kind of, again, ego-driven commentators who want to protect their position to seem like they were still freedom fighters by going, I obviously am very pro-vax and I've had all my, but I don't, we must be very careful about the mandates. Never say anything suggesting there was a problem with the injections. Now, for me, the way I see the entire plan, everything that was done from the announcement of the pandemic to the beginning of the jab rollout was very specifically designed to make as many people as possible feel like this was mandatory. That was the whole point. The problem was that most people, by the time it was here, the idea that they had a choice didn't even enter their minds. That's what they did. So that's why it's irrelevant. It's complete nonsense about at least they didn't mandate it. And it's also why they were never going to, wherever they put in mandates, they took them away again after a few months, because they knew that was never how they were going to do it, because everything they were doing was about making it feel mandatory for people. So I just don't buy this whole argument of, at least it wasn't mandated. No. I think it's dangerous, actually. We mustn't think of it in that way.
Yeah, it's quite strange, the kind of lengths that people go to defend Trump. Very irrational. But, the people are desperate for, they call it hopium, didn't they, and we were following the whole Q thing for about right at the start, the election 4 years ago. And you still, part of you just sort of watched it going, maybe something's going on,
the whole white hat behind the scenes. Yeah, I know, and the mad thing about it was supposed to be Hillary, and we were going to be locked up for 10 years. Then they were going to roll out the jabs while they were building the FEMA camps, and anyone who wouldn't take the jab was going to go into a camp. And you're thinking, that is the worst. That's the most idiotic way of doing this. That is the most guaranteed to fail way. If your object is to get loads of people to agree to take a jab because they trust their government, and you think having the government lock them up for a decade, and then say, if you don't take this jab, we're going to put you in a camp. Well, no one's going to take it, are they? That's enough time for pretty much everyone to realise that the government is trying to kill them and doesn't have and also that there's no emergency. I just don't know why anyone would buy that idea. It's really bizarre. But this is important. You go on Twitter or anywhere else online, and it seems like there are hundreds of these people. But I've obviously been going around the country doing these book signings in pubs, meeting real people. And before I started, I thought, I bet I'm going to get a few of these Trump people come and have an issue with me, or maybe even just say, I don't agree with you about that. There hasn't been one person.
Oh, really?
I haven't met one real person who actually thinks like this. I know there must be a few, but I think an awful lot of that is being generated by the algorithm. It's a bit false.
I was going to say the first thing that springs to mind is that maybe in the flesh they're actually too embarrassed to articulate it because it sounds so absurd. But behind a keyboard,
The thing is, Jake, everyone says this. I'm really not. I'm not as angry or intimidating in real life as I sometimes come across online, because I could sometimes seem quite angry and things, and I'm not. I'm really not. I'm pretty nice to everybody and quite gentle, because most of my aggression goes in my pictures.
Yeah.
So I hope that people don't feel like that. It was funny. This chap came up the other week when I was doing one, and I thought, here it is, finally. It's happened, and he was being very serious, this guy. Right. And he came over and said, Bob, I've got a real issue with you that I have to bring up. I've got to talk to you about it. And I'm thinking, right, here we go. Yeah. So I said, okay. And he said, my name is Robert, and I fucking hate the name Bob. And then he sort of did a little smile, but he was still trying to be quite serious. I was obviously very relieved. And then I explained to him that I also really hated the name Bob for my whole childhood. And I'm only called Bob because I told a teacher at school I absolutely didn't want to be called Bob. And then I was forever after I was Bob.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Because I was going to ask you about it, actually. It did occur to me the other day. Because it's there's no one under 40 called Bob, really.
There is nobody under 40.
And I just wondered if it was if it was something that you'd adopted to sort of give yourself that air of maturity and gravitas. in the paper business?
No, weirdly, it started when I was about 13
Right. Okay.
at school. Where when you start a new class at school, you have a new teacher, and they go down the register, and they might say, "Well, what do you like to be called?"
Yeah.
Rob or Robert, and I remember just saying, sort of jokingly, "I don't mind what you call me as long as you don't call me Bobby." I think I said Bobby. It started as Bobby. So he then wouldn't call me anything except Bobby. Everyone in that class then called me Bobby. They thought it was hilarious.
Yeah.
And then it just spread, and at some point it got shortened to Bob. And now now obviously it's really weird if anyone calls me Robert or Rob, even though it's still technically my name.
Yeah.
But when I started at the Telegraph, and I was only 25, I remember them saying, "It's great that you're called Bob," because people will imagine at least a 50-year-old, if not older.
Yeah.
And they actually said, be careful not to let anyone see what you look like.
Right.
Because if the readers know that you're only 25, they just won't like your work in the same way.
Yeah.
Because even Matt was, he was probably by now, Matt is about the age that everyone has always, the cartoonist Matt at the Telegraph, who does the pocket cartoons on the front.
I'm not sure I would. No.
Do you not? No. That's funny, because for years, whenever I said I'm a cartoonist for the Telegraph, everyone said, "Oh, you're Matt."
Oh, you're Matt. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Anyway, he's a lovely guy, and he helped me a lot. But even he was much younger than everyone thought. So he kind of actually would advise me. He said, just keep it under your hat that you're this young, because they'll like the fact that you're old. And then because I'm Bob, and still people are confused if they see, I think, well, I've done a lot of interviews by now. People must know what I walked in the room. Yeah, of course, yeah.
But I've got a sort of weird Mandela effect thing with you, because
this is good.
When you started becoming, it's not really that interesting, but when you sort of came on the radar with all the all the stuff with the COVID stuff, and I thought, oh, Bob, yeah, he's been around 40 years, because I seem to remember being a kid and looking at seeing your signature.
That's interesting.
And the only thing I can think now is that I'm thinking of, is it Giles? Is that a cartoon?
Giles, yeah, Giles.
Similar
Giles is very famous, and
has he been around for a long time?
But he died. He died quite a while ago, Giles.
I'm just wondering if that's what I remember
Giles
as a kid.
Most people had a Giles annual somewhere in their house or in their grandparents' house in the downstairs loo.
Yeah, it's the only thing I can think that maybe it was that.
And his style was similar to, and I think Giles probably inked with a brush as well, maybe. So yeah, there are similarities in the style. But I think I checked, because I wasn't just Bob when I first started at the paper. And I think I tell this story in my show, but when I filed my first cartoon, the editor said, "Oh, that's great." My Scottish editor said, "It's really great." And then he said, "What the hell's that down there in the corner?" And I said, "That's my signature." He said, "It's terrible. Change it. You're signing a cartoon, not writing a check." So he said, "Pick your first name or your last name, and that's what you are from now on." Okay. So I think I went away and I thought, well, Bob is better because it's more cartoony. And I checked, are there any other cartoonists called Bob, or have there been? And I couldn't find any. Mm-hmm. So I thought, I'll be Bob. And then that was it.
It's quite a good Scottish accent you use. I think you pride yourself on that, don't you?
Well, I had to do it. I obviously had to do it a lot for the show.
I find Scottish accents really difficult.
I like doing voices. My younger brother, who is not, I'm kind of quite well known. My middle brother is also quite well known in a creative, he's a writer, he's a screenwriter. And then our youngest brother is quite different in that he sort of lives a very self-sufficient life, and he is in the countryside, and he's very, he's not trying to be famous, I suppose, in the same way we are, or he's not ambitious in the same way. Anyway, he's hilarious. He's by far the funniest of the three of us, and he's absolutely amazing at doing voices. I mean, his Donald Trump is probably the best Donald Trump you'll ever hear.
Oh, it wouldn't be as good as that.
And-
Is it Shane Gillis? Have you heard him do Donald Trump?
Yeah.
Oh, that
But
thought
he's
that
not.
was
It's not
funny.
just that it sounds like Donald Trump. He's really funny in the way he does.
Okay.
Sometimes he'll phone you up and just be Donald Trump for 2
Right.
hours on the phone. He won't break out of it at all. And then now he's started. He has conversations. He'll do Donald Trump with Bobby Kennedy, and now he's just starting to work in Elon Musk as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so I like doing voices, but I'm always reluctant because I know my brother's much better than
Older
I am.
brother, younger brother?
Younger. I'm the oldest
Oh, okay.
of 3. Yeah. And we all do slightly, unusual things. So my youngest brother's a taxidermist.
Oh, okay.
And then middle one is a screenwriter. I'm whatever I am now,
Yeah.
cartoonist.
Yeah.
But we all were parents really encouraged us to just do whatever we knew we'd like doing
Yeah.
and we were happy doing,
Yeah.
which is very lucky. And, it's not until you get older you realise lots of people don't have that. There's some sort of pressure or expectation
Yeah.
for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And our parents just really supported us, even though it was quite mad what we wanted to do, and there's absolutely no guarantee of success, And we all did well at school. So obviously we all were pressured by, teachers and people not to do the thing we decided to do, saying, that's not going to work out.
Of course,
you should go and do whatever it was,
Yeah.
law, medicine,
Yeah.
go and read English.
Thing is,
whatever it
99% of
is.
the time they're right.
Yeah, I suppose.
It's always,
yeah, they
it's
are,
always
yeah.
the well-known people who are
I know.
successful who get to
Hang
tell
on,
the story.
don't listen to them, and then
Actually, you should listen to them.
you should. Yeah, that's a good point, Jake. Yeah, I know. But I believed them much. It was my parents who, especially my mum, who were just never having any of it. She'd be the one who said, "No, he's going to be a cartoonist. That's what he's going to do." Whereas I'd always be thinking, maybe I should go and read
Learn a
English
trade.
at
Yeah.
Cambridge. That sounds
Yeah.
good. Can you
Yeah.
imagine if I'd done that? I wouldn't. I'd be quite a different person now.
Who knows? Who knows? I sort of sometimes think things just end up in the right place. But that's another philosophical track, whether there is actually free will and what actually, what.
Yeah, well, I never knew where it came from. I knew my dad was quite creative, and he sort of got pushed into doing law because he was the first person in his family to go to university. So they basically said you either do law or medicine. So he picked law, and he hated it, and he was never happy. And he's very musical and quite artistic, so he would have done something like that, I think, had it been nurtured in any way. But the specific cartooning thing, he didn't do cartoons or anything. So I always thought, that must just have, come from wherever. It just must be random that I do that. And then I discovered a few years ago, when my grandma was still alive, she took me to see some, second or third cousins or something who were showing me this with these wood carvings that I think my great uncle had done. They were all like caricature. They were all cartoons, almost, and quite similar to my style, but just in wood. And I suddenly, then you realise, it has come from somewhere. There is something that goes back in the genes or whatever.
Yeah, yeah. Sort of tempted to keep and leave it at that. Let's see if there's a.
This is knowing when to stop.
It is,
It's one of the hardest things, isn't it?
just keep going.
And that's one thing I really liked about having a deadline. You can't.
Yeah.
You have to stop.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there isn't time to get it in the paper. So that's whatever else you might like to do, you have to stop. Whereas now I'm back into that, I suppose, rather arty thing of, is it finished?
Yeah.
What else could I do?
Well, it's endless, isn't it?
Am I going to completely mess it up if I try and tweak this bit here, add something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, right. I'm sort of quite pleased with that. It's quite unusual for me because I've done.
All of me.
I've done your crotch. I didn't.
Nice.
I could tell you were slightly uncomfortable as I was staring at your crotch.
Okay, but what are my hands? Are my hands in there or not?
No.
Have you done?
Well, your hands are in there, yeah, but
You done me like this. It's going to be really erotic.
your fly's undone.
Yeah, that's it.
Strange when I take photographs at the end. It was more noticeable with Mick. I took the photograph and looked at the photograph and went, "Who's that?"
Yeah.
I just think
I know.
it's really strange. And even then, like, that's not who I've been talking to for 4 hours.
Yeah.
And I don't mean it in some woo-woo way. I mean, literally, that doesn't look like you.
No, but that's the whole point of portraits. That's why they're still so. Because you can.
I don't know what it is. It's very strange.
But there's still things that don't come across in photographs. Especially, it is true. Some people are more photogenic, aren't they? So some people, you photograph them and you think that looks like you. There are some people who never really look like themselves in a photo for whatever reason.
Yeah. Oh, hang on, no, stay there then. I'll turn it around.
Oh wow. That's really great. It's been really fantastic.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
I
great
really
way to spend
appreciate
an
you coming.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me.
We're making signed prints available of all the paintings in the 1,000 Words series. If you'd like to own one, go to jakefern.com or click on the link in the description.
I think we have the ability in ourselves to make our lives whatever we want it to be. I came to the realization, a few years ago that what we're living through, I think is definitely a battle of good versus evil. Our system is actually encouraging psychopaths to rise to the top of the tree.